Hello, Algebra 2 students. So today we are going to focus on factoring with the factoring trinomials. So there's three terms with a lead coefficient other than 1. So we did the ones with 1 before. Again, we're going to focus on ones that have a lead coefficient other than 1. So you can see on our first example, we have a 2 out in front, 2n squared plus 13n plus 21. And notice that we can't factor the 2 out of all three terms. So this is going to be how we approach it this way. So step number 1, check for greatest common factor and is it in standard form. So yes, it is in standard form because we have an n squared, an n, and then a constant. And we do not have a GCF because we cannot factor anything out of all three terms. So that's step number 1 done. Step number 2, rewrite the trinomial as a polynomial with 4 terms. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply the first and the last. So what's 2 times 21? Hopefully you're going to say 42. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to give me 42 and add to give me 13. So again, what multiplies to give me 42 and adds to give me 13? Hopefully you are thinking of 6 times 7. 6 times 7 is 42, and 6 plus 7 is 13. So the way we're going to do it, we're going to keep the first term, 2n squared. We're going to keep the last term, 21, and then we're going to split the middle term into those two. So we said 6 and 7. So one is going to be 6n, the other one is going to be 7n. Notice 6n plus 7n gives me 13n. So if I would break it, so I would simplify it, I would be back at my original. And then from here, you're going to do it like we would have done the previous lesson. You're either going to do it by grouping or the box method. So I'm going to keep doing both. And again, you pick what works best for you. So if we're going to do grouping, we're going to group the first two. 2n squared plus 6n plus, and then we're going to group the last two, 7n plus 21. So if I look at the first two terms, what can I factor out? Hopefully you're noticing a 2 and an n, and I'm left with n plus 3. If I group the last two, what can I factor out? My answer would be a 7, and I'm left with n plus 3. So again, this factors completely into what's on the outside, 2n plus 7, and then what do I have on the inside? N plus 3. Okay, remember, if you don't like grouping and you prefer the box method, you are going to draw the box. Okay, then I'm going to put each of my 4 terms in the box. So we have 2n squared, a 6n, a 7n, and a 21. So if I look at the first row, what can I factor out? A 2n. If I look at the second row, what can I factor out? A 7. If I look at the first column, what can I factor out? An n. And the last column, it looks like I can factor out a 3. So this will factor over here. We're going to have 2n plus 7. And at the top, I'm going to have n plus 3. So it's up to you. Once you get it split back into 4 terms, then you're either going to do grouping or do the box method. It is up to you, whatever you prefer. Okay, let's take a look at the second one here. So again, I'm going to multiply the first and the last. So 3 times 4 is 12. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to give me 12 and add to give me that middle one of negative 13. So since it's a positive at the end and a negative in the middle, both of them have to be negative. So again, I'm going to keep the first term, and I'm going to keep the last, and I'm going to split the middle one up into 2 negatives. So again, what multiplies to give me 12 and adds to give me negative 13? Hopefully you're thinking negative 1 and negative 12. So negative 1, so that would be just a negative y. And then we said negative 12, so that would be negative 12y. Notice these two together, when I combine them, give me a negative 13y. Okay, so again, if we do grouping first. Okay, if I group the first two, so I'm going to have 3y squared minus y, and then plus negative 12y plus 4. So what can I factor out of the first two? Hopefully you're thinking y, and I'm left with 3y minus 1. And the last two, I can factor out a negative because that's a negative there. And it's going to be a negative 4. And I'm left with 3y minus 1. So what's on the outside? Y minus 4. What do I have on the inside? 3y minus 1. Okay, so again, to do the box method as my other option, we're going to draw a box. And again, you're not going to do it both ways. You're going to pick the way works best for you, but I'm not sure which way you use when you're watching the video, so I'm going to go through both. So again, I'm going to put each of these 4 terms in my box. So 3y squared, a negative y, a negative 12y, and a positive 4. So again, if I look at the first row, what can I factor out? A y. The second row, what can I factor out? It's going to be a negative, because that's a negative lead there, and a negative 4. And then the first column, I can factor out a 3 and a y. And the last column, I'm going to factor in a negative, because it's a negative there. And if I can't factor anything out, I'm going to write a 1 down to hold its spot. So what's over here? We have y minus 4. And then at the top, we're going to have 3y minus 1. So again, it doesn't matter which way I do it, I'm going to get the same result. Okay, if I look at the third one here, we have 2x squared plus 3x minus 9. And again, I need to check, is it in standard form? The answer is yes, because I go x squared, x, and then constant. And then can I factor out a GCF? The answer is no, because 2, 3, and 9 do not have any common factors. Okay, so we're going to multiply the first and the last. So I'm looking for 2 numbers that multiply to give me negative 18 and add to give me my middle term of 3. So again, I'm going to keep the first term. I'm going to keep the last term. And again, let's see, what multiplies to give me negative 18 and adds to give me 3? They have to be opposite signs, so it doesn't matter which one you do first. So I'm going to make a negative and a positive. And again, the bigger one needs to be positive because I'm getting a positive 3 in the middle. So what about 6 and 3? 6 times 3 is 18. And if I make the smaller one negative, so 6 times negative 3 is negative 18, but 6 plus a negative 3 gives me a positive 3, and that's what I wanted. So I said it should be positive, what'd I say, 6x and a negative 3x. So again, these two combine together to give me that positive 3 in the middle. So again, if we do grouping first, it doesn't matter. You're going to pick, again, which one works best for you. But again, if I demonstrate grouping first, if I group the first two, so 2x squared minus 3x, and then plus, if I group the last two, 6x minus 9. So in the first two, what can I factor out? It's going to be an x, and I'm left with 2x minus 3. And the last two, what can I factor out? A 3, and I'm left with 2x minus 3. So what's on the outside? We have an x plus 3, and what's left on the inside of both? A 2x minus 3. And again, if you prefer the box method, let's do it that way as well. So again, I'm going to draw the box. I'm going to put each of these 4 terms in the box. So 2x squared minus 3x, a plus 6x, and a minus 9. So again, if I look at the first row, what can I factor out? Hopefully you're going to say an x. If I look at the second row, what can I factor out? Hopefully you're going to say a 3. If I look at the first column, what can I factor out? The 2x. And the last column, I can factor out a negative because this top one is negative, and I can factor out a negative 3. So again, what we have here, we have x plus 3. What we have at the top here, we have 2x minus 3. Again, you notice we get the same answer either way we approach it. Okay, let's take a look at a few more examples. How about this one here? So we have 2v squared minus 12v plus 10. Okay, so on this one, it is in standard form. What can I factor out, though, of all 3? Hopefully you're noticing I could actually factor out 2. And I'm left with v squared minus 6v plus 5. Okay, now let's make this easy on ourselves. We could factor out 2, and now we have a lead coefficient of 1. So we don't need to do grouping. We can directly go to this. So what multiplies to give me 5 and adds to give me negative 6? So again, I got to put a v, my variable, in both. Since it's a minus at the end, it's a plus at the end, that means they're the same sign. and a minus in the middle. That means they're both negative. So again, what are two factors of 5 that when I add them, I get negative 6? Hopefully you're thinking negative 5 and negative 1. And this one is done. So if you can factor out that lead coefficient completely, then just factor like we did before with the lead coefficient of 1. That's easier to do. Okay, let's look at the last one though here. So we have 12n squared minus 34n minus 6. So again, it is in standard form because it goes n squared, n, and then constants. What can we factor out of all three terms? I'm looking at this and I'm thinking 2. If we factor out 2, we're left with 6n squared minus 17n minus 3. So in the end, remember, we got to keep that 2. So in the end, it's going to look something like this. Okay, so I'm going to multiply 6 and negative 3. That gives me negative 18. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to give me negative 18 and add to give me negative 17. So again, I'm going to keep the first term, keep the last term, and I'm going to split that middle term up into two pieces. Now, since it's a negative at the end, they're opposite signs. And since it's a negative 17 in the middle, that means the bigger number is negative, or the larger number is negative. So what are two factors of negative 18 that add to give me negative 17? Hopefully you're thinking negative 18 and 1. So this is going to be a negative 18n and a positive 1n. So if we do grouping, we're going to factor out a 6n, and we're left with n minus 3. And the second one, we can't factor anything out, so we're going to put a 1 to hold its place value, so it's n minus 3. So again, we've got the 2, we've got the what's out in front, 6n plus 1, and what do we have left? N minus 3.